the New York Giants, because we start bottom up from the division from last year, finished 3-14, technically the worst season in Giants franchise history. So big off season when you go out and you get Abdul Carter with the number 3 overall pick, and then in the back end of the first round, you trade back in and you get Jackson Dart, who has been exciting in camp, who looks good, who seems to want the role.
Yep.
He did. This is the trope this time of year, right? Area quarterback learns all reporters' names. That's like a big check mark in the box, especially if you're in the big city.
Didn't he
Like
say
that.
he said something too about like appreciating everybody coming out or something like that? I think he did that also, right?
Like I have to
It's
be
a
here,
smart
Jackson, or
move.
else.
Smart move. Like, I mean, here's a tip for like every like 22, 23-year-old rookie. If you start referring to reporters by their names, they
Oh,
will appreciate it. I
forget
promise
about it.
you. I promise you
Forget
that.
about it. It's
I
it
think
it
Eli
is
was good at that, right? You covered the Giants.
maybe for some people. I will say and I think I could say it. I mean, we have a story about Russell Wilson coming out in the next couple weeks. And I visited with him recently, and you guys will be able to read about that in the next issue of Sports Illustrated. But he's one of those guys, Russell, now the starting quarterback of the New York Giants, where we did a story like 5 years ago for the magazine, and then I see him and he's like, well, okay, so when we did that, you were just having a son. And so your son's what, 4 years old now? And all this info, which like, I'm sure, I don't know if someone prepped him on it or whatever it was, but it's like he has that gene. And I am in this I'm in this spot, Albert, where I'm not totally out on Russell having a halfway decent season for the Giants right now. Is that crazy? Like that I'm
Because
not.
he remembered that you were having a son 5 years ago.
Well, I think that's maybe that softened that softened me
It's
a little
smart.
bit,
No, it's
but
smart.
um, I was thinking about the fact that you know he had his 3 bad seasons, air quotes, right?
Mhm.
Were 26 touchdowns and 8 picks with the Broncos. If you stretched out his Pittsburgh season, like if you did the ratio and you just gave him the other 4 games at the pace he was going at, that was going to be a 24 touchdown, 7 interception season. I mean, by all biomarkers, he's better than Daniel Jones, right? Like, and could
Mhm.
probably survive in that system better than Daniel Jones just because he's used to being mobile. He's used to having to get out of the way. He's used to being sacked all the time. Um, you know, I'm not talking about a 3-win to 10-win turnaround here, but maybe 6 or 7 wins here is an optimistic thing, and Russell kind of gets his career back on track.
No, I mean, I was high on the Giants going into last year, and that's like makes me a little hesitant this time around. But look, the reason I was high on the Giants last year was because like I really felt like when you looked at where they were on the lines of scrimmage, they were in a good place, and that was before they got Abdul Carter. Remember, so like I thought like some of the things that they'd done on the offensive line would take a little bit better than they have. And losing Andrew Thomas, I think, was one of the more underrated. I mean, like
Oh yeah.
when you're talking about like big injuries and things that like really affected a team's season, like I think Andrew Thomas was one of the biggest injuries across the league last year because they had really tried to do a lot to fix the offensive line, and then you lose your left tackle. And I think it's one of those things where, like it's offensive lines can withstand injuries, but when it happens to the left tackle, it generally has this cascading effect where it can affect a lot of different positions. Because do you move somebody over to play over there? Like how is it going to affect like how a defense is going to attack you? All of that, and that's why those guys the best ones make 25-30 million dollars a year. So I think having Andrew Thomas back is a big deal for them. We'll see if he can stay healthy. Um, what does John Runyon look like with another year? What does John Michael Schmitz look like with another year?
Well,
And
that's
then
the
I
big
think the
one.
defensive front has a chance to be really, really good. I mean, when you're looking at Dexter Lawrence, who I think was like one of the best defensive players, regardless of position in football last year, and you have Brian Burns in his second year in the system, and you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who's still got a lot of physical ability, coming back, and now you're adding Abdul Carter to that mix. I I always look at it like when you're strong on the line of scrimmage, you should be in every game. And whether or not you win every game is a different story. But if you're strong on the two lines of scrimmage, you should be able to at least keep games in a pace that you're comfortable with and compete and be in every game. And I don't know. I mean, the Giants' offensive line would have to get a lot better, but I don't think they're without pieces there. I don't know. And we can get into Russ and to Malik Neighbors and what they're going to do in the secondary with all the additions that they have coming over, bringing Javon Holland over from the Dolphins and bringing Paulson Adebo over from the Saints. But I just think like where they are on the lines of scrimmage, that has to be the basis of where they're going. So as much as we make about everything else, especially the quarterback position, I think that that's where it has to start for them.
So this is one of those things where, for me, the good best case scenario is that you figure it out. You have three talented pass rushers and arguably the best interior player in the NFL.
Right.
You have to figure that out. You know what I mean? Like it's not like you can't. It's not like when a team gets a good like two good wide receivers and one of them gets a lot of balls one year and one of them gets not as many balls. This is one of these situations where if you're the Giants, you have no choice but to figure it out. And the reason that I liked Abdul Carter in the first place is, I mean, this schedule is impossible. The Giants have the hardest schedule in the NFL, and I mean, relative to the team, I don't think it's particularly close. Like this thing is just
I
absolutely
mean,
brutal.
I was actually thinking about this when I was looking at it. Like some teams really say, like, okay, if they can survive the first 2 months, then they'll be fine. The others, it's like, well, there's this stretch in the middle of the year, the back end of the year that could really kind of cause the wheels to come off. This thing has like, I mean, it's not like there aren't a couple of it's not like there aren't winnable games, but you look like through the schedule and it's like there aren't very many like dead spots in that schedule at all.
Nope.
There are single games that are like a little lighter lifting than the others, but there isn't like a dead spot in the schedule where you're like, this is where they can build some momentum.
So here's what my optimistic scenario is here. So you start the season at Washington, and Albert, I think, Washington went out and got Laramie Tunsil this offseason because they felt that there were some issues with the offensive line. And I think that there still might be some issues with that offensive line, right? Then you have Dallas in week 2, has some issues with their offensive line. You have Kansas City in week 3, clearly had some issues with their offensive line. If you can come out of I don't even care if you win any of those first 3 games. If you can come out of there saying Shane Bowen's got it figured out, Shane Bowen's got it cooking, Brian Burns and Thibodeau and Abdul Carter, they're in the backfield all the time. And it looks like, I mean, to me, the playbook is how the Rams used to do it with Aaron Donald playing all those edge guys off of Aaron Donald and a lot of stunts and games and all that twists and all that kind of stuff. If you come out of those first 3 games feeling good about what Shane Bowen's doing, to me, it's like, okay, like everything else is going to take care of itself. The schedule sucks. It is what it is. The offensive line is what it is. You went with Abdul Carter instead of trying to fix, the tackle position. There's nothing else you can do, right?
Right.
And so I think if that defense comes out of here with looking like we think it is, great. If we're in week 5 and they're bottom third in pressures and sacks, like, I'm
Right.
going to riot, and I think a lot of people will.
I mean, really, that's the key. I think the defense is going to have to carry things early. And if they're going to build any sort of momentum, it's going to be based on what they're doing defensively. And then you look at some of the guys that they've drafted, and I think Carter's obviously going to be at the top of the list. But what does Tyler Nubin look like, who is like really promising as a rookie in year 2? What does Drew Phillips look like as their nickel? There's some young players where it's like, okay, this has got to be a hit for Joe Shane, as a draft pick. And if 2 or 3 of those guys really show a bit, like they really could have something on defense. And then you're talking about, okay, like now you don't need to score 30 points every game to win, which is sort of the formula that Russ had in Pittsburgh last year, right? Like where you didn't need to throw for 350 yards. For all the Saquon stuff, Tyrone Tracy was pretty good as
I
a
mean,
rookie running back
that's
last
the
year.
thing. Weren't they? Wasn't
And
Tracy
I
and
know people, and I know, and I understand it. And I was standing on the field when the Eagles fans were chanting "Thank you, Giants," onto a television set. So I get that, but I mean, like coming out of that with Tyrone Tracy isn't a horrible result, and the offense potential has potential. Now, is the offensive line right? Is quarterback right? Those are two massive questions. So I look at this, Connor, and to kind of flip this into our expectations thing, you need to be in the mix in December. You know what I mean? Like I just think, I think that this connects directly to the job security of Brian Daboll and Joe
well,
Schoen.
yeah.
I think John Mara wants to be right. I think he wants to be patient. I think he wants to see this through. I think to some degree, and those guys said privately, like they were worried about this privately after that first year. They win that playoff game, and it just sort of changed the dynamic a little bit, But um, like that, I think did a little bit of damage to how they're trying to build, like that early success. And I think now you at least have to be relevant in December. Is that fair? I mean, the schedule makes it so it's gonna be tough to make the playoffs, maybe, but
Here's where, like, here's where Mara needs, and Mara's great. I mean, in terms of like the spectrum of owners, like Giants
yeah.
fans complain about him all the time, and they're idiots. I mean, just this team, I don't know. Giants fans really kind of have like I have a little bit of a sore spot for them. But I think that this is where, like, if you're Mara, it's like you have to come out and almost say, like, listen, guys, these people are going to be here. And if you want to fly these goddamn planes over the stadium, go ahead. But, like, we just drafted a quarterback. Brian Dable is a quarterback developer. He got the best season that any of these guys could have gotten out of Daniel Jones. And then Daniel Jones got hurt. And
Mhm.
I paid him. John Mara, paid him. I wanted to pay him. And so we paid him. It's not like Brian Dable kicked the door in and said that we wanted Brian Dable long term. Like, I think these are some of the records that need to be corrected. And I think that he needs to get out and say, almost like, guys, we have the hardest schedule in the NFL. Like, are we really going to draft Jackson Dart for a season to sit and to learn and then fire the guy that took him based on information that he got from a lot of guys who were close to him? Like,
Right.
this is idiotic. Like, I think you need to come out and you need to buffer this thing and just sit your fan base down and be like, guys, like, this was a bigger rebuild than you guys thought. And we won a couple games. We got hot before, but like, this is going to take a little bit of time. And if you want to fly an airplane over the stadium like an idiot, go ahead. But like, what do you want us to do? Go 10-7 against the hardest schedule in the NFL with Evan Neal as our right tackle? It's just not going to happen.
Well, let me ask you this: how different does this look if Joe Schoen is successful in trading up for Drake May last year?
It looks a lot different, right?
So, like, that's the thing is like it's just you can't you can't snap your fingers and fix the quarterback situation. You know what I mean? Like unfortunately for the Giants, it's going to take a little longer because I mean they were the sixth worst team and not the third worst team 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, and last year it's interesting, like because that win over was it who they beat? Was it the Colts? It was the Colts, right? They cost them the number one pick.
Possibly. I'll double check it.
I think it was the Colts. So, like that's a hard thing too. You know what I mean? Like, is that you were bad, but you weren't bad enough to get Cam Ward the same way you were bad, but you weren't bad enough to get Drake May. And that's a funky place to be in as a coach. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it all goes back to me at least, somebody probably should have said something about like, guys, like, what are we doing on Daniel Jones here? Because they'd had a year with him. And so there probably should have been a discussion where it's like, And I think the obvious answers obviously would have been to sign Saquon and then tag Daniel Jones, essentially do the opposite of what wound up happening. But at the time, they were trying to get both done, and Jones was the one that was going to be the easier contract for them to do. So it's just, I think everything is complicated by that. Everything's complicated by that first year they had. And it's sort of like they've been chasing that for 2 years, and they haven't been bad enough to clean it up with a quarterback pick. So, we'll see what Jackson Dart can become. But if Jackson Dart is playing late, then that's probably not a
Not
great
what you
sign
want
for where
either.
the season's going either.
Right. So that's my. I'll put a bow on that. Yours is your optimistic scenario is just to be in the mix in December. Mine is that Shane Bowen is figuring this out defensively. Yep. We have some sort of a rotation. We have some sort of a plan. We have something that looks right. I think 7 wins feels good, and maybe 2 or 3 of those over some quality opponents. Like we don't get boat raced by Dallas. We look good against Brian Schottenheimer. That kind of thing I think is important. But I'll just put a bow on it like this because I just thought about this. Okay. Let's go back to when during the Hard Knocks season when they're getting rid of Saquon Barkley. If you said to Giants fans, we're not going to re-sign him, but the 2 guys that we draft immediately following that will be the first 2 rookies in NFL history to go for 1,000 yards from scrimmage combined since members of the 1960 Dallas Texans. Would you take that? And say and then say, look, I don't know what's going to happen to Saquon when he gets to Philly.
I would based on where you are and like the longevity of that position.
Wouldn't anyone have taken that? Anyone would have taken that.
Yeah, I mean,
anyone
would have taken if you look at where they are. I mean, that's the other thing about the Saquon thing. Not to like relitigate it, but I mean, Saquon was perfect for the Eagles because they were on the doorstep. They had been in the Super Bowl a year earlier. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it was, 14 months before or 13 months before they signed him, they were in the Super Bowl, Right. So that's the perfect point to go all in on a running back. The Ravens' perfect place to go all in on a running back in Derrick Henry. The Giants weren't there. And so if you are paying that guy at the top of the market, are you going to get good enough fast enough to make that a good contract? Probably not, right? If you're being realistic about it.
I don't know.
It's like, I mean, it's like putting a nice hood ornament on a broken down car. You know what I mean? Like on a broken down old Chevette. Like, no offense to anybody who likes Chevettes, but it's like,
Take a look at this.
I don't know. Like I think like you look back at that and they just were not the Saquon's timeline did not match up with their timeline.
This fan base, whatever. I'm going to spend 45 minutes on this, so I'm going to get going to the next division here. But this fan base wanted Eli Manning or wanted Tom Coughlin gone for years and then cried when the Giants got rid of him because they didn't like Ben McAdoo. They wanted Eli Manning gone for years and then they cried because they didn't like Daniel Jones. And they wanted Saquon Barkley gone for years and then they cried when he did well with the Eagles. It's like you guys don't appreciate the good players that you have. You don't appreciate the 2 Super Bowls you won in 7 and 10. In a short stretch time. And, everything always has to be great, 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 great. There can't be anything bad or else we'll fly planes over the stadium. And it's like, just get rid of it. But anyway, your response in the comments. Go ahead. I'll enjoy reading those later.